With Thanksgiving comes that pressure, right? The pressure to feel thankful. But what if it's not something you can just switch on? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down a sermon that lays out a pretty counterintuitive path to genuine thankfulness. And believe it or not, it all starts with a criticism.
So, the sermon kicks off with a question that I think we can all relate to. Why is it so darn hard to be thankful sometimes? It really gets that it's often way easier to see what's wrong, to start with a complaint, than it is to feel grateful, especially when you're feeling empty or just going through it.
And this quote right here, it just nails the whole problem, doesn't it? It perfectly frames the challenge. Trying to be thankful can feel so forced, so hollow, even kind of fake, if you haven't actually found a real reason for it. It's like gratitude needs a solid foundation to stand on.
Okay, let's dive into the sermon's first big idea. It uses this really powerful biblical metaphor to explain why our default setting is so often criticism and, general dissatisfaction. So first things first, we got to get our heads around this central metaphor. When the sermon talks about shepherds, it's not just talking about guys on a hill with a flock of sheep. It's a really broad term for leaders of all kinds. We're talking kings, priests, commanders, anyone in a position of power and influence.
Now, what's so fascinating here is the stark contrast. On one side, you have these bad shepherds. These are the leaders who are all about themselves, they enrich themselves, and in the process, they destroy and scatter the very people they're supposed to be protecting. But on the other side, you have the ideal, the good shepherd, a leader who preserves, protects, and actually nourishes their people. The sermon's point is, when you're living under bad shepherds, it's almost impossible to feel grateful.
So that feeling of being let down, of being failed by your leaders, that sets the stage for the big turning point in this whole narrative. Right when the criticism and frustration are at their highest, a totally new kind of leader shows up.
The sermon uses this really vivid, imagined quote to capture the people's mood. They are not happy campers. They're not ready to just roll out the welcome mat and start singing praises. They're grumpy, they're dissatisfied. As the sermon puts it, they are just not in a thankful frame of mind. Why? Because their basic needs are not being met.
And this is just brilliant because it shows how deeply the Good Shepherd understands people. He doesn't scold them for not having enough faith or for being ungrateful. No, instead, he points right to their most basic, fundamental need. He gets it. He knows they were hungry, and now that they've finally eaten, their entire perspective is starting to shift.
So here's the crucial point. You can't be truly grateful when you're hungry. It's that simple. And that hunger, it could be for actual food, sure, but it could also be a hunger for justice, for peace, for feeling safe, or for spiritual nourishment. A good leader knows that this emptiness has to be filled first. You can't just order someone to be thankful.
Okay, so if you can't command thankfulness into existence, how does it actually happen? This is where we get to the core argument of the sermon. Gratitude isn't an action, it's a result, something that has to be carefully, patiently cultivated.
And boom, there it is. That's the thesis of the entire message. Gratitude isn't spontaneous. It's a fruit. Think about that. A fruit is something that grows naturally, but only, and this is key, only under the right conditions. And what are those conditions? Trust and good leadership or good shepherding.
So let's break that down into 3 really clear steps. Step 1, you have to fill the emptiness, meet the need. Once people are nourished and feel cared for, then step 2 can happen. You start to build trust. And it's only from that rich soil of trust that step 3 becomes possible. Genuine thankfulness can finally begin to grow. See, it's a sequence. It's a process, not a switch.
All right, so what does this all mean for us, especially when we find ourselves stuck in that not thankful frame of mind? Well, the last section of the sermon gives us something really practical, something we can actually do.
Instead of trying to force gratitude when your heart is running on empty, the sermon's advice is to first fill yourself up. The idea is to literally feast on what is good. Look at this list. Whatever is true, noble, right, pure. It's about consciously changing your mental and spiritual diet to feed your soul. Only then can you expect the fruit of thankfulness to grow naturally.
And here we have the ultimate call to action. It kind of flips the whole thing on its head. The sermon suggests that if you're struggling to find reasons to be thankful, go out and become a reason for someone else to be thankful. By shifting your focus from yourself to others, by acting as a good shepherd for them, you're not just helping them, you're actually creating the very conditions for gratitude to exist in the world.
And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about.
Maybe the real path to finding our own thankfulness is by feeding others, literally and spiritually. By becoming a source of goodness for someone else, we give them a reason to rejoice, and we might just find our own reason in the process.